backing up.
I'm gonna look for the damage resistance side of it. I got like 3 seconds on my shield, and then I'm gonna go in and do something stupid. Oh, never mind. Onepeg is already in the bit. Oh my god, brother.
That bone shield.
I mean, it's not like they're not dying, but holy shit.
I'm in, weaken them.
Okay, all right, updated build. Necromancer. We've made a couple of changes so far. Instead of relying on the shadow damage from Bone Storm, and there was an affix that was creating a blight pool underneath a mob and having the blight do 100% more damage, we've instead modified this a bit. So this is what I would probably call like what I'm doing for mid-game anyway. Stats, as you can see, 4,500 attack power, 4,700 armor, 4,000 life. Give or take. Instead of bothering to stack all resist or looking at specific resistances, I'm looking instead to opt for reduction of damage. So in this case, you can see that there's damage reduction from distant enemies, 20.9%. A little third node there, third tick. For affixes, this is what I'm looking at doing. Bone Storm giving the barrier, I think, is key because you need to be able to get in there so that you can last long enough to do a DPS spike. Second is stacking armor. I do have affixes for this chest that I could swap out for the extra 0.5 or 0.05% armor per second, stacking up to 50%. I just haven't bothered swapping it because I'm looking for something a little bit higher level than this one now that I'm in tier 4. The stuff that we ended up modifying that is different in this case is that we're using 3 uniques now. The first is Howl from Below. So this, when I cast Corpse Explosion, causes a skeleton to charge at an enemy and then explode. So now the Corpse Explosions, instead of just being used for essence generation or to have hopefully the mob stand on the pool and stay there, now you can hit any corpse from a more remote spot and the corpse will run at the enemy. Even if they're at a distance or they jump backward, it just increases the utility of the DPS and keeps the DPS on them, which is the most important thing. Then there's 2 others, but the other affix that we run is Barrier. In this case, when you hit an elite or hit a special enemy, I guess, because sometimes the barrier just kind of shows up even though you don't intend it to. It also ends up proccing off of thorns sometimes, so even if you get hit, the thorns damage being reflected will proc the barrier, which is kind of nice. Gives you a barrier. In this case, it's for 2,000 HP. I have another pair of pants that actually has damage reduction from close and damage reduction from far away that I'm looking to replace these pants with that I've upgraded that are really nice. That will be replacing these eventually. I'm running life gems and everything, but the 2 other uniques. Greaves of the Empty Tomb. So these, instead of opting for, like I said, the affix that vacuums up mobs using Sever and the Sever proc, we still have the vacuum affix on one of these over here, but in this case, this is really nice, but not for the unique affix. It's more for the lucky hit that's on this. So these give max evade charges, which is sweet because as a side point, when you upgrade something all of the way, sometimes you will get extra stats on the item, but in some cases you also get extra like usages. So in this case, they would start off at 2 max evade, but you get a 3rd one when you fully upgrade it, which is really sweet. In this case, we're getting 8.8% lucky hit and essence cost reduction and damage reduction for any enemies that are affected by shadow damage over time, which all goes into our skills, which I'll show you in a second. On the case of the weapon, it's an upgraded Bloodless Scream. In this case, it's 766 plus 25, and the stat rolls on this thing are bonkers. 25% darkness skill damage, 30% to chilled, 36% to frozen, and then 61.9% cold resist, which is kind of moot. That doesn't really matter so much. The best part of this is the affix for the lucky hit. So lucky hit is something that I'm trying to stack at this point. There's lucky hit from the gloves, there's lucky hit from the boots, I have lucky hit on a ring, so I have like 20 something lucky hit percentage chance. And for lucky hits, as long as they are frozen enemies, which again, we're applying chill and trying to freeze them, but if they're frozen, you have a 100% chance on those lucky hits to get 5 additional essence. So I generate 5 essence on hit, and all of my dots cause chill, and all of them cause lucky hits 20% of the time, every dot tick. So this is really good. We want this because now we get essence generation, and that helps with being essence starved, which is a problem with this build in particular, is that you run out of essence a lot. On the amulet, we have the blight pulling enemies in, in. And there are people that have, in the last video, criticized this and said, instead of use Blight, use Corpse Tendril. Corpse Tendrils has a cooldown. And with Blight, you can double and triple and quadruple cast it if you have the essence built up, so that you group all of the enemies up into a ball right in front of you, because when you hit an enemy with Blight that's like in front of you, it will vacuum everything to the center of that thing right in front of you, and then you hit them with Sever and they die. But well, again, we'll get to that. On the ring, we have 113% increased damage for 6 seconds after Shadow Blight hits any enemy 10 times. So that's huge, because you can start suddenly seeing the procs go off and you hear like this little like booming noise, or like it sounds like a little gunshot sound or something, where they're getting hit by that additional damage, and it's really nice. And then the next piece is another affix for Shadow Blight. Every time Shadow Blight deals damage, it increases the next Shadow Blight's damage within 10 seconds by 32%, and it stacks 5 times. So you put a whole bunch of Blight pools underneath people's feet with the miasma from Corpse Explosion and stuff, and then they melt. It's kind of amazing, especially since you can highlight corpses with the red outlines of the corpses over walls, like around corners. All you have to do is kind of like move your mouse around, and if you see a corpse, you cast it on them. The skeletons run at them, the little spirit skeletons from the glove affix. They run at them, they blow up, and then you end up collecting all of the fat loot from the stuff that's around corners that never really saw or ran at you. So it's you can kind of do some cheeky shit. On the side of the skills, all right, so we'll start off with the top. First is Reap, just like the last guide video. First is Reap with Enhanced Reap. So Reap it increases your damage reduction by 15% for 2 seconds whenever you hit something with Reap. So you get a short burst of damage reduction, which is nice. If any enemy within 2 seconds dies, you get 30% attack speed, so it allows you to spam your skills that much faster, which is again really good for damage spike. So whenever you have a group of trash mobs, I always try to like get a couple of dots out, swing Reap once so that you get like the damage reduction, and then you pop Sever and blow them up, and then you end up getting attack speed. It's pretty nice. Reap forms a corpse under the first enemy that you hit every 5 seconds. So you hit an enemy, it generates a corpse, you cast something on the corpse, and then use Blight, which is down here. Blight, we just get 1 rank because it's for the vacuum effect. It's not for the damage that it does. We're basically putting all of our spike damage into Sever, this skill here. But on Blight, we do Enhanced Blight, slows enemies by 25%. Again, we're doing bonus damage to anything that's slowed, chilled, or frozen, or stunned. Anything that gets a crowd control effect on it basically just gets obliterated. You and your minions deal 15% increased damage to enemies with Blight, so we get Supernatural Blight. Sever is the bread and butter skill. Once we get everything grouped up, we just sever everything down. Sever damages everything along its path for 25% of its additional damage, which is Enhanced Sever. We max out Sever. And then Paranormal Sever. Every 4th cast of Sever makes enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds. So if you have extra damage affixes to vulnerable enemies on your gear, stuff like that, this is where the benefit comes in. So massive, massive, massive deal, which is why the attack speed from something like Reap is so important, because you can use it to spike enemies down, because the Severs come out that much faster and everything dies. When you use Sever, because it'll send out a Spectre at a distance, and then the Spectre goes like out and away from you, and then does like a little circle, and then it comes back, and then does another one right here when it returns. So what you want to do to double up on it is you want to be about the distance from me to this guy away when you're DPSing stuff. You need to get in their face, which is why we end up using Bone Storm down here at the bottom, but you know, we'll get to that. The next thing is Corpse Explosion, which I kind of already explained. Corpse Explosion blows up, but what we're doing is we're using Enhanced Corpse, which extends the radius, and we're using Blighted Corpse, which instead of it blowing up right away, turns it into a darkness skill and makes a miasma on the ground. So you can stack these up, and then you have multiple of them ticking at the same time for 10 and 15 and 20,000 plus damage per second. So that's huge. On top of this, we also have Hewed Flesh, which says 12% of the time on a lucky hit, again, your damage has a 12% chance to create a corpse at the target's location, and it's doubled for bosses. So it's a 24% chance to generate a corpse. What we want is for something like this to occur, like as much as we possibly can. So again, this is why we stack lucky hit. In addition to Corpse Explosion, on this part of the tree, we get Grim Harvest. Consuming corpses generates 6 essence, so because you're killing a ton of trash, everything generates a corpse except for the swarm of bugs mobs, and you just spam that and it gets all of your essence back. You deal 9% increased damage for 6 seconds after consuming a corpse, so that pretty much has 100% uptime. We also get Decrepify, Enhanced Decrepify, which means that they will be, they have a 10% chance to be stunned for 2 seconds, again, on lucky hits. And then Abhorrent Decrepify, which says lucky hit, enemies hit while afflicted, have a 15% chance to reduce your cooldowns by 1 second. So whenever you come across a mob pack, you want to make sure that you have Decrepify on them, because it slows them and it reduces the damage that they do to you by a pretty significant amount. So in this case, we're at 4 out of 5. I think that that's kind of the sweet spot. It seems like it works out the best. Next section, we do necrotic carapace. When a corpse is formed, you get fortify for 6 seconds. It only works from base skills. So you hit them with reap, it generates a corpse, you get a bit of fortify. That will stack up slowly over time, but it's not something that I tend to rely on. It's just like if you have an easy time killing trash, it tends to build up a little bit and it gives you a little bit more defense, which is nice. We grab Reaper's Pursuit for 1 point, just like whatever to get into the rest of this tree. 3 out of 3 Gloom, 3 out of 3 Terror, and 3 out of 3 Crippling Darkness. The skill points that I have allocated on this are from getting all of the renown needed in order to be able to get the extra skill points too, by the way. In the last section, we grab Bone Storm, and there's a reason for this. You get damage reduction by using Bone Storm by 15%, and you also get a 20% increase to crit chance, which is huge because, again, if we're DPS spiking stuff, you pop Bone Storm, you get the crit chance, you get the bubble generation from the affix that we have on our gear. Where is it? This one, Bone Storm, generates a 4% HP barrier for everything that it hits. So for each little tick of damage that it does to anything around you, it generates a barrier for 4% of your HP pool. So if you have 2, 3, 4 mobs standing around you, you basically get your entire HP pool doubled up on top of that worth of a barrier, and it never goes away. I have dove on 8 elite mob packs all at once, dove in right in the middle of them, and with Bone Storm popped, and they can't get through it. It just generates too fast for them to be able to break it down. Once it's gone, you know, it's a different story. In the case of the remaining points, you put obviously Shadow Blight because we're all darkness and shadow damage. Standalone 3 out of 3, damage reduction by 18%, reduced by 2% for each active minion, of which we have none. This is a no minion build. And Memento Mori, sacrificing skeletal warriors and mages increases their sacrifice bonuses by 60%. So in the Book of the Dead, we go Reapers for the 15% increased shadow damage. No Reapers, we sack them. Skeletal mages, we go 15% damage to vulnerable enemies because we're making them vulnerable on purpose. And then for golems, you can kind of play around with this whichever way you want to do it. Some people like the attack speed, some people want the 30% crit damage. I opt for max life because I actually want to stay alive. In the gemming side of things, we go HP gems. Some people have said use sapphires, which is damage reduction when fortified. You can also use topazes, which is damage reduction when control impaired, which means if you get frozen or if you get stunned, if you get crowd controlled, you could stack these instead of HP. But personally, I like having a ton of extra max life. I feel like the absorption is better there. If I have more life, I also get a larger barrier, which obviously matters. And then on the Paragon side of things, and this is just me like experimenting. I don't know if this is actually the way to do it or not. I'm level 72 in hardcore, and I'm trying to like stay alive as best I can. But all I did for the first page of Paragon is I rushed the right side to get this 20% damage node, and because I also have the willpower, I get another 10% damage. So this is 20% instead of 10. It also gives max life. Get these magic nodes along the way. I could probably backtrack and grab this, but the one thing that I did make sure that I did here is that I opted to use the control gem and then get the necessary intelligence around it in order to be able to get the extra piece of this. So this gives me 38% damage to crowd controlled enemies, and because I'm causing chill and I'm causing slows and I'm using decrepify and all this other stuff, I'm gonna basically have 100% uptime for what this does for me. So, and this isn't even like a high rank glyph. It's I think like rank 5 or 6. So this giving me 38% flat damage plus the extra 10% to chilled and 20% to frozen, because that's what we're causing, matters a whole lot. This is like probably the keystone to the early part of this build. Once you get to like, you know, 50 plus 60, whatever, I would build this out and make sure that you grab both this preservation node and this knowledge node at the same time. And then you go up to the second board. The second board is the Wither board, which is this legendary piece. Wither is basically shadow damage bonuses every time that a shadow ability does damage. It has a 5% chance to proc and do 50% more damage, and then that gets amplified for every 50 willpower you have. And then as I've been working through this, I've been grabbing the rest of the board, and then once I got up to the second glyph socket, I used Sacrificial in this case because it gives bonuses to the magic nodes around it, and I'm working on building that up, but it's just to give me resist, extra shadow damage, you know, just extra fixes, and then I'm gonna grab the intel here and then work over to this side and go into the next board. I think that's everything. And like obviously throughout the once this is recorded and edited out, Saint will end up putting in some B-roll of like, you know, dunking on people. The other thing that I did do here is there's two options, and the reason why I built it this way is because I wanted the ability to be able to use this for both like more speedy clears and also stuff that was around like trying to get some progression. Like you want a little bit more survivability. These boots, Greaves of the Empty, that does like the desecrated ground beneath your sever as it travels. These aren't for the severing specters and like the desecrated ground and the shadow damage and stuff. That's completely ancillary. If I could find boots that had essence cost, lucky hit, and all these other things, and the damage reduction piece built into them that were just legendary or rare, and do it that way, I would, but I haven't found anything that's itemized this well, and this plays perfectly into the build that we're making. But if I want to do something speedier, there's also something to be said about frost or like chill stuff. So I do have these greaves that I maxed out as well, and what I will do on my runs is I will swap between them. If I'm trying to travel from, you know, one spot to another, I'm trying to do more speed clear stuff, leaving behind the chill, the trail of frost behind me. This compounded with the chill effect from the shadow damage causes everything to freeze like crazy fast, and I'm doing a lot of essence generation off of stuff that's frozen because of the two-hander. So we can use this to our benefit because of the movement speed that's built into them and the crowd control duration and the slow duration reduction. It helps out an awful lot with just trying to get stuff down quicker. So if I'm in a group that's really good with their DPS and I don't have to worry about survivability as much, I might run these instead, and I tend to swap between them like depending on the dungeon run that we're in at the time. And that's kind of it. So I would say like this is my current build. When you engage, you hit them with Reap, generate a corpse like on a boss fight. You would generate a corpse, hit them with Blight, try and left click them a couple of times, and basically the idea is you're trying to get the corpse piles built up under their feet. You would then like cast just a whole bunch of corpse explosions underneath them so that it builds up the miasma. If you want to wait for like a stun phase because of doing bonus damage to stunned enemies, you can do that. Or what I tended to do was wait until I had essence generation where I had cast the Blight and cast a couple of abilities and then got my essence generation back up to full, then pop Bone Storm for a DPS phase because you want the 20% crit chance, and then you just sever until the bar is empty and then rinse and repeat. In most cases, I'm doing like level 20 and 22 nightmare progression pushes at this point. It's usually like a two-phase cycle for that. And you want to make sure, obviously, that you have Decrepify up on them for the cooldown reduction so that you get Bone Storm back faster so that you can go in. In most cases, you can pop Bone Storm and then Decrepify like an elite pack. And then the Bone Storm, before it's over with, will have procced the lucky hits so many times that most all of the cooldown is already back. And if you do it right, if you have enough enemies around you, you'll end up having like 100% uptime for Bone Storm. It's pretty sweet. So yeah, so that's the build, and I think it works great. And then obviously we'll continue progressing. I'm at 72 now. We're going to work our way up through to, hopefully we'll get to 100 here in the next couple of days, and we'll finish out the build and see how she fares. All right, but right now in tier 4 I can dive into a mob pack and we're pretty good. So all right, cool.